Welcome back to DIY Try or Buy podcast with Yiesha and Mee Hee. We are really excited today. Our episode is on mental health during the holidays, something I think a lot of us either struggle with or want to get better during the holidays. There's a lot of activity. So you might think, what's going on today? Because this episode looks a little different because we have our first guest on our podcast. We have Chase Cotton, which I'm really excited to have him. He is the director of the Willow Center, which is local to us. But I'm just going to have Chase do just a little bit of intro of who you are, and we're just excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be on DIY Try or Buy, especially be the first guest. What an honor. Yes, so as Mee Hee said, my name is Chase Cotton. I am the community director at the Willow Center. Mm-hmm. The Willow Center is a DMHA certified outpatient mental health counseling and substance use treatment provider in Brownsburg, Indiana. We serve about 270-ish clients a month.
Okay. Wow. So, when we were thinking through some really great topics to discuss, I know the holidays for me can be triggering for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I struggle because that means more gatherings, more people to entertain, right, to go. Sometimes you get asked to do Friendsgivings. Mm-hmm. And so you're in, different social settings and meeting some new people. But also, you may see clients or just know there's a lot of holiday drinking involved. And right, so somebody trying to maintain sobriety also might be struggling. And so that's not me. However, I always want to be conscious of who am I inviting, if I'm hosting a party, things like that. So tell us just a little bit about your work, the clients, not mentioning any names, but just people in this time in the holidays, like, how they're struggling and how you might support any of the clients that need any type of, support there.
Yeah, sure. So it can be a triggering time for many of our clients, most especially because not all of our clients have healthy home lives. Mm-hmm. Some of them are coming from very difficult situations that include a lot of trauma, whether that be familial or even environmental, depending on their context. And so when we start going into this holiday season where it's back-to-back gatherings, we have to consider those social settings and those environmental settings and how triggering they could be for our clients who are pursuing better wellness in their life. Mm-hmm. So from a mental health perspective, of course, there's a lot of social anxiety that comes from some of those, multiple people type parties and gatherings. But then also from the sobriety and recovery perspective, there can be a lot of scent cues, visual cues, social cues that can make people want to drink. In the case of family-based trauma, you might be seeing individuals that have hurt you in your past, or you might be expected to have difficult conversations with people that you're not ready to have just because they expect you to talk, right? Mm-hmm. So any of those situations can be really triggering for people, and it's our goal at the Willow Center to help folks take the next healthiest step in the right direction, so that they can live a normal life, but with healthy boundaries.
So you just triggered me again. Because I didn't think of that. Like, that is a time where everyone comes together as a family, and a lot of times, especially with the older generation, and they're trying to settle things, they feel that that's the opportune time to talk to you about what they did or didn't do.
Right.
So my question to you is, because I will probably face that situation, which is like, because it does happen.
Sure.
So my question to you is, what advice would you give to handle those kind of situations if and when it does happen?
That's a great question. So I would give advice, first of all, to hosts, and second of all, to someone who may be triggered, okay? Mm-hmm. So for hosts, let's say you are responsible for hosting a gathering, whether it be family, friends, a Friendsgiving, if you will, like you mentioned. The first thing you want to be aware of is even just generally, what has your party gone through, right? If you have a brother-in-law who's in active recovery, just include some soft drinks, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe put some boundaries on how heavy of a pour you're doing when it's time for dinner and the wine glasses are coming out. Mm-hmm. Like, be conscious of the fact that can be a really strong trigger to that brother-in-law. Okay. Right? And offer them water, offer them soda, offer them something else. Don't hand them a beer if you know that they're going to say no, or if that's going to be a really strong trigger for them. You can also consider the fact that, well, frankly, it's possible to have fun sober, right? Maybe it's time for a sober gathering this year just to change things up. It might make some others uncomfortable, but if it means that one person is included who would have been totally excluded otherwise, that might be worthwhile. Now, something else to consider from the host perspective is purposeful gatherings, right? So we gather for the holidays because it's the holiday, but that's not really a purpose, right? If the purpose is we're having a dinner party, then we can plan some different boundaries and contexts and activities around the dinner party. That might include games, it might include sharing care times, or if it's Thanksgiving, it could include everybody going around the table saying what they're grateful for. But if it's a backyard barbecue, it's gonna have a whole different vibe, right? And a lot of times backyard barbecues are less formal. There might be more people, there might be more booze flowing, things like that. So it's take into consideration some of those factors that are gonna add or take away from the purpose of that gathering, and that can help control some of those potential triggers for people.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if I was to encounter a situation like that, I would just say, you know what, this is not the purpose for this event. Now is not the time. Maybe we could circle back
Absolutely.
at a different.
And that
Okay.
takes practice,
Right.
right? Setting those compassionate boundaries as a host is really difficult. But if it is like, this is our family dinner party, we don't need to be talking about that right now.
Gotcha.
That might be all you have to say, and people are like, oh, yep, got it. Thank you, Yiesha. I understand. Without offending people.
I like that.
Now, let's say you're the person that has struggled with depression or anxiety in your past, or you have some past trauma related to your family or friends that you're about to see, or maybe you're in recovery yourself. It's important to, one, plan ahead, and two, know your outs. So by planning ahead, what I mean is know what could trigger you, right? Know what your own triggers are. If you know great aunt so-and-so is going to ask you about your political beliefs, that
Why
can
aren't
be...
you married yet?
Yeah, or something that personal, right? Where's my grandbaby? You know, why haven't we got a grandbaby yet? Like, it can be anything like that. They may not know that maybe you and your partner just experienced a miscarriage, right? So know what your triggers are and know how you're going to respond to those things in kind. It might be time to set a compassionate boundary, like you were just mentioning, where, okay, great aunt so-and-so, I understand your love for kiddos, but listen, we just went through some stuff, and you need to take a step back and not talk about that, right? Know your outs would mean if things start getting out of hand and you're getting really overwhelmed, you go into that fight, flight, or freeze response where your heart rate is racing and you can feel your neck and shoulders getting real tense and your breathing's getting shallow. You need to know how to get the heck out of there in a way that's not necessarily going to disrupt the whole party. So know your actual exits, but also if you need to call someone, if you need to call a sponsor, or you need to call a friend to walk you through that trigger response before you can go back in, or if you need to go home, you might have to go home, or you might have to have an exit strategy so that your health is preserved and maintained, because that's priority number one. Right? If you're about to really act up or really react, or, I mean, God forbid, have like a recurrence if you're in recovery, you got to get out of there.
Okay. Okay, so if I were to have a toolkit, what could I do to prepare not to be triggered as I go into situations like that? So would it be meditation, or what kind of tools would I need for that toolbox?
That's a great question. And I'm going to present the response as DIY try or buy.
All right.
Okay?
I like that. Look,
He's
okay.
Doing my best to come prepared. Okay, so from a DIY perspective, it is incredibly important to understand that prevention is the best intervention. Okay, so what you want to do to prepare yourself and prevent being triggered is self-care practice. So some self-care practices that you can do it yourself at home would include breathing exercises where you use breath control and breath meditations and mindfulness to understand how your breath is linked and notice how your breath is linked to your emotional response.
Okay.
If you can slow your breathing down and notice it and feel it, you can also slow those emotions down in the moment. You can practice other forms of meditation, like mantra meditation, repeating positive thought phrases, focusing on a desired outcome. If it involves conflict, let's say there could be conflict at this gathering, there was conflict in the past, and that could be triggering for you. Loving kindness meditations, where you practice forgiving thoughts and compassionate response as you ponder those thoughts and focus your attention on them. That can be really helpful. All free, all do it yourself. Now let's say you're something like me. Like I'm not going to come up with a meditation on my own, or maybe you're like, this is a little bit hippie woo-woo, I don't know about this, right? Then I would recommend checking out like an application like Headspace or Calm, where they're usually free and you can do a guided meditation, and those mindfulness practices can be great. There's other mindfulness things, there's other DIY self-care things you can do, like take a nice hot shower, right? Or Spend some time with a furry creature that's going to lick you all up and down and bring some joy to your life. A favorite creative activity, etc. So that's a DIY option. Okay, a try option, and not to bring it too serious, but it is serious. You should try therapy. You really should. If you've never done it, even if you've not got a diagnosis or your symptoms aren't too severe, I couldn't recommend this enough. Therapy helps, right? Being able to work, especially through past trauma or past hurts or patterns of behavior that can make social situations difficult, like during the holidays. Therapists or social workers or mental health counselors are trained with strategies and tools to help you in those moments and to help you prepare for those moments better than you can do yourself. So try therapy. I recommend it. As far as a buy perspective, and this might be a little bit of a stretch, but I would recommend you buy a really good, comfortable pair of athletic tennis shoes because you can use those to go on walks. And there is no healthier form of exercise than just going outside and walking around the block. Could be a slow pace, could be a swift pace.
I like that.
But when you're walking, you can put your earbuds in, listen to music or a podcast or something to calm you down. Or you can just listen to the nature sounds when the car's driving by and just clear your head and get your body moving. Because there's a lot of really strong brain science research that shows that moving our bodies triggers the release of endorphins, and those endorphins, as well as other neurotransmitters like oxytocin and dopamine, help reduce the stress response long term as we enter into those scenarios.
I like that.
Those are great suggestions. The shoes were
it.
something I didn't think of, but echoing therapy. I've had a therapist. I'm actually starting with a new therapist to change it up because I'm just in a new phase of life. But I so, recognize that is that's a start. It's what I'm choosing to do.
Yeah.
I probably need to meditate and breathe and learn some of the patterns because I know there's a connection. I've just never done that yet. You meditate daily, and I love that. And you have great mantras. I feel like I need to practice that.
What are your mantras, if you don't mind me asking?
I have a prayer closet. I'm a Christian, so I literally created a space in my home upstairs where I try to go on a daily basis and pray. I do affirmations. I always say that this too shall pass. So when things happen, any type of adversity or things that I deal with, I just speak things because I believe that there is power in your words.
Yeah. And
so I try to put it in the atmosphere, and I try to set the tone, not just for me, but for my home, for my son, for my dog. Anybody who I encounter. But for me, it's just affirmations, candles, any type of scent to get me to that place of calm.
grounding.
Yeah, I love my son. Actually, he's been doing this since I was pregnant. I literally he listens to like the ocean. So even now, he cannot go to bed without listening to the ocean. Yeah, so that just calms him to kind of calm it down. Or we use the sprays on our pillows. I use it in my shower. I have a lot of stress. I feel like I have a lot of stress. I really don't. I mean, I do, but I don't. But those are the type of things because as you go into the world, you want to have your full armor on, right? Before you go to battle. Not to say everything is a battle, but you just want to be prepared and armed for what you will face. So, but I still have everyday struggles like everybody else, but that's one way to combat it.
Those are great practices.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think something that you said that really resonated was, that preparation, knowing kind of your outlet. So if you are going to a new place, I guess in a social settings, you could get triggered, but you're not sure from where because it's new and maybe new people. Who do you seek if you're not sure, if you're not with somebody, you're stepping out of your comfort zone, you're going to just a new social setting or new gathering. How do you inform anyone? Or, is the host, as a host, should you be okay with saying, hey, if I'm the host, hey, you're new, let me show you around. What can I do as a host when I know there's a lot of different people I don't know, trying to make it inclusive to as many people who, somebody might be bringing a friend, a cousin, something, but how can I as a host really think through some of those things?
Yeah, it's a great question, Mee Hee. I think the first way to respond to that is to, I guess, make a pact with yourself as a host that you will not make assumptions. Because one of the first things we do, whether it's based off, whether it's Yes, whether
What
it's
song would you like to hear, Yiesha? Sorry, I was triggered.
right. You make no assumptions, because one thing we humans really, really adore doing is assuming based on people's appearances or the way they speak, or based off what little small tidbits of information we may have about them before they enter our homes or our party spaces. And those assumptions can turn into pretty devastating scenarios very quickly. So as a host, I think the best way to be inclusive, especially if you don't know if someone has trauma in their past or could be triggered in a social scenario or they're in recovery themselves, is to find ways that are neutral, calm, like break the ice type moments. Right? So for example, one of my favorite ways to break the ice, especially with new people, is to offer a toast. And in that toast, and it can be a sober toast for those who might be listening that are in recovery. It doesn't have to involve alcohol. If you start your gathering once everyone's arrived with a toast, it's a way to set the tone for the evening, and it's a way to invite anyone else to share what they might want to share, right? So you can say, a toast to new friends and old, and that's an opportunity to introduce your old friends and your new ones right there as part of the toast. I love this about you. I love this about you. I love this about you. You should be friends with them. Here's to friendship, right? It's a really simple, colloquial type icebreaker that doesn't require any like Boy Scout camp games, that everybody can be a part of, and if everybody's like, oh, I've got one too. Now it's an invitational sort of scenario. So that's just one easy way. You can break that ice without making any assumptions about anyone.
I love that because, you said the word earlier about being inclusive.
Yeah.
And it really does start with not assuming anything from anyone. So that's something I think I have to be extremely mindful of when I'm in a setting, because I've been in those places where I've been the new person, or early on. I won't involve my husband. Let's say prior to my husband, right? If I've been to social settings or I'm being introduced, they're like, "Oh, well, what do you eat on Thanksgiving?" Well, I eat turkey and I eat but I remember those questions and I'm like, it triggers, right? It's like, here we go again.
Can cut
Yes, yes. You talked about yours just now, right? So,
Would you like some malt liquor? No, I'm kidding.
So you're right. Just really getting to basics about just treating everybody, like you said, like as new friends, welcoming. Everybody needs to be mindful of that. I feel like that's such a great thing. So.
I thought of another quick example.
Absolutely.
If you'll permit me, okay?
Yeah.
It goes, I guess, in context of a toast, but never offer someone something to drink without asking them what they'd like. Right? So, that's one way where we make assumptions that we don't think we're making assumptions because we're not saying anything. We're trying to be good hosts, saying, here's a glass of such and such. Let me get you a beer, right? This is in particular for my friends who are in recovery. Ask someone, may I get you something to drink? What would you like? Really easy twist and scenario where you're still being a good host, but that gives them the opportunity to say, oh no, I don't drink, without it being a weird, awkward thing. They're just answering your question. Right. They're saying, I would like Coke. They don't even have to tell you they're in recovery if they don't want to. They don't even have to tell you that they drink when they're sad if they don't want to, right?
That's good.
So
I
just
love
quick.
that. And it thought for me, if I am hosting, to maybe start with the soft beverages, the juice, non-alcoholic, and then maybe taper into that if, because you're not assuming you're just giving all the variety. Sure. So that you say, like, we have a lot of options here tonight. We have Coke, Diet Coke, we have some juices, lemonade, and then if you want the beer, there's over there, just to kind of go through it, because even age, right? Young kids and things. So it's going to help me remind myself if I'm hosting to kind of start with the options of what can I get for you, right? Instead of assuming like, there's the beer and there's the wine, but not everybody drinks.
Right. And I was thinking too, as we talk about the holidays, is that, my heart goes out to those that don't have somewhere to go. But the holidays actually is supposed to be about being grateful, being thankful, appreciation of family and friends. But it's always the opposite because suicide rates are up, depression, loneliness. myself, I'm not from Indiana, but, you know, a lot of people move, expats, they move to different states
Sure.
and they don't have family.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to me how the holidays are supposed to be a great thing, but we have so much of these rates that go up that are the negative. How do we handle, I don't want to say how do we handle it, but why is that? Why is it so high?
Yeah.
Depression, suicide, why is it so high during holidays?
That's a great question. And after I share some of the reason behind, maybe I can share some resources of how we could respond to that.
Absolutely.
So one of the reasons why suicide rates go up, why rates of anxiety and depression go up, why relapses and recurrences happen more often in the holidays is because of the triggers of the gatherings, right? Because this might be the first Christmas without mom, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm with my family, but we're all sad, right? Or it could be like in an expat scenario, moved away, new community. There could be just good old-fashioned social anxiety. Like this is the first Christmas I've had alone. This is the first Thanksgiving I've had to go to a restaurant for instead of have my dad, bake the turkey or whatever.
So it's the memories a lot of times.
A lot of times it's
The
memories
holidays.
attached to past trauma.
Okay.
I think another reason is we live in a society that I would say manifests loneliness, right? There are a lot of elements of our day-to-day life that are done alone, whether that's driving to work alone, whether that is eating your meals alone because the kids are already at practice and because your partner is late from work or whatever, whether that's our if we're being honest with ourselves, our evening doom scrolls that last between 20 minutes and 2.5 hours before we fall asleep, where we are just looking at things alone. And typically those things are comparative, and typically those things are showing us about how good everyone else has it aside from ourselves, right? So our culture manifests this, this undercurrent of loneliness. And that loneliness, I would go so far as to say, is a public health epidemic because of the way it affects our brain, right? So when you are lonely, your serotonin levels are all messed up. Your oxytocin levels are all messed up. You create a dopamine deficit. And dopamine is that neurotransmitter related to feeling good and motivation. Like, that felt good, let's do that again. That gets way depleted when you're feeling super bummed out and lonely. Like, I might be the only person that feels the way I do right now. That's when we start getting into those more severe mental health related spaces where I might want to hurt myself, or I might want to just get really drunk or go use a substance that I haven't touched in 3 years, because all of these neurotransmitters that are affecting my emotions are getting depleted in these moments of isolation.
Yeah.
So the way we respond to that is by manifesting connection and safety, right? We have to create connection and safety in our gatherings and, I would argue, in our own lives. So take the expat example that you just shared. It's your first holiday in a new city. And maybe you're a bachelor and you haven't even plugged into the YMCA yet to join the local whatever sport club you want to make friends in, right? You're just brand new and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so lonely. I really wish I was back with my folks, but they're 18-hour drive away. It's just not happening this year. Consider hosting a gathering. That might be outside your comfort zone, right? But consider hosting that gathering, right? Because if you really want that connection, I can guarantee you there are 3 other people in your block that feel the exact same way. So what if you were the dude, right? What if you were the dude that was like, do you want to come over? Like, we don't know each other, but like, do you want to just come, or let's go neutral, right? Let's not go, you don't have to come to my house if you don't feel comfortable. Like, do you want to just go get a hot dog somewhere?
Yeah.
And like, just break the ice and make a connection. You might not be best friends, but you won't be alone. Right. And that face-to-face interaction triggers dopamine releases, triggers oxytocin, that connection hormone, and it counteracts some of that depression and anxiety and isolation.
Yeah. I think too, with our society, as you were speaking about how our society does things, we commercialize every good thing to where when it's commercialized, it takes all the goodness of the meanings of holidays out, which is, I don't have the money to buy this for my kid, this video game, and or I'm not getting this bonus because I can't buy these things. Sure. And so all those, that happens. But you planted a seed that I appreciate, that I want to do because I've lived in different states. But it might not be my house because you're right. A lot of people are lonely. We've created this our society where it's okay to be lonely. And I think with COVID, it just made it even
Oh,
worse,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So I think with our platform, I think this is something that we could maybe do on a quarterly basis, is just have gatherings for, people here or who want to see us, and have game nights or do something.
Yeah.
Because if you were to ask me like 5 of my neighbors on my block, I couldn't tell you.
Right.
I could not tell you.
Right.
Whereas when I grew up, I knew all of my neighbors on my block, and the ladies, the parents would tell on me if I did something wrong, because they knew my mother or my grandmother. Like, you're not supposed to be out on these streets. It's the street lights is on. You need to be home. Get your butt home. I mean, it was like another parent.
Right.
But that sense of community that we always talk about, Mee Hee, it's gone. And I think, like you said, we need to create that in our own way. You might not say, "Come on over," but you might say, "Let's go have some coffee."
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, wherever it is. It doesn't
Right.
matter which space it is, as long as it's a space where I feel safe and where I feel included, right? Because that inclusion is what makes connection happen.
Yeah. Let's talk about kids
Okay.
and their mental health.
Yes.
Because
Oh,
with
God.
all the commercialization, and you're a dad too, so maybe I'm looking for my own advice, parent advice, but I noticed even in my own son that he's got a little bit of anxiety, and there's some triggers there.
Yeah.
And I feel like holidays get really intensified because double whammy, his birthday is also in December, really close to
Oh,
Christmas.
Mine is too.
So
too.
he's
My
like,
son
it's
is-
just a whole party, right? December is a whole party. But what are some tools, when, especially with young children, because I feel like I had this growing up, like, oh, I got to go to another, party with a bunch of grown people. And like, sometimes that's a lot of anxiety, because even as a child, you get questions like, how are you doing in school? Or come give me a hug.
Oh,
even.
look, we're not gonna talk
Let's
about that one.
that's a trick. We all
that's
sigh.
Come here, sugar. Give my
Right.
And they
Right.
really I can see my son and my husband and I, we have said, if you don't want to hug anyone, you don't have to.
That's great.
Right? Like, you don't have to feel bad. It's okay. And sometimes it's even his own grandparents. He just doesn't want to.
Sure.
And I
And
think
that's
that's okay in that moment. If
Absolutely.
he chooses, he just doesn't. We don't want to force that, right? Or
Right.
like,
What you're teaching is consent.
yeah, or give them a hug and a kiss. He may not want to, because I remember feeling like, I don't want to hug anybody right now. Like, I don't even want to hug my parents right now. I want to get home. Like, I just
Right.
feel like that greeting and then the exit of parties and situations
Can
for
be a
young
lot.
people. What's some of the advice maybe to give to parents for us to be really mindful in any setting, even outside the holidays?
Yeah, I think it boils down to two main things for kids. That's what you just mentioned, right? So you need to give your kid permission to say they don't want to do that, right? Because there are these underwritten social scripts that we have been raised in, where after you open that present, you go give that person a hug and say, thank you.
Yeah.
You do it, young man. I'll punish you if you don't, right? And that is toxic. Right, and that makes kids feel really trapped. So give them permission to say no. You can also give them permission to exit the room if you need to. Right, if they just need a moment, like, hey, go into your cousin's bedroom for a little while alone and read a book, right? Or go play with your toys for 5 minutes, chill out, calm down, get away from the noise, get away from the adults asking you hard questions about your life, right? Give them permission to do that. And then for the play aspect, kids very rarely get played with by adults in general, right? So like, especially when it's a gathering of adults who are all clinking glasses and getting merry and, cutting cake, it's like very much adult-centered gatherings. And the kids are either ignored, go play with yourselves, or they're, forcefully included, if you will, where it's like, get over here and sit at the table and talk, right?
Yeah.
Sit your butt down, Nancy, right? It's like that. So play can be really important, because that's how kids feel safe and connect, is through play, right? So if you can create some opportunities where the adults are getting childish, that's great, right? Where you get a few of those adults' butts on the ground, and we're all playing action figures for a little bit, or we're all playing charades as a family, or whatever it is, whatever you feel comfortable, whatever's fun for you. If it's nice out, go in the backyard and just play tag or football or whatever you want to do. Play together. That can be really meaningful for a kid, and that can help them feel more safe and more connected and a little more stable on the baseline as far as anxiety goes.
Yeah. And because kids can still be respectful of receiving a gift just by saying thank you.
Absolutely.
But there's cultural, I won't say generational differences, because I know my parents and that whole generation of baby boomers and older, they would be offended.
Oh yeah.
They really would be offended. Like, you're not going to give me a hug. I bought you this and I spent my money. I worked. No. So there's boundaries that need to be set.
Compassionate but firm.
And I always say, well, I'm sorry, if he doesn't want to hug you, then, you're more than welcome to, this might not be the right thing, but I have said this. Sure. You're more welcome to, take the gift back. Because I don't want them to ever feel like they've spent money on my child and it's not, appreciated. And if you don't feel he appreciates it, it's okay if you need to take it back. But he said thank you, and that should be enough, right? So I don't know.
I actually like that, right? Because it's forcing those adults in those moments to consider what they're expecting.
Yeah, they're not
like,
always
what are you actually getting out of it?
Right.
Are you getting this sort of whatever you've termed the appropriate level of affection from this child?
Their past traumas they're putting on a child.
Yeah, that's their feelings, right? If you're offended, you deal with that.
Right. Yeah.
Wow, great stuff. So you also host a podcast.
I do.
Can you talk about a little bit about that and kind of how it started, how it's evolved?
Yes, of course. So I co-host the Willow Center's podcast with my colleague Mason Christie, who's our clinical analyst and engagement coordinator. And it started about 3 years ago, shortly after I came on staff at the Willow Center, more or less as a way to I guess, destigmatize the ideas of mental health and addiction in everyday conversation. And the best way to destigmatize some of these issues that have been made taboo throughout the past few decades is by talking about it. One of my favorite quotes is from Fred Rogers. I'm a big Mr. Rogers guy. He once said, while he was testifying to Congress, no less, that what is mentionable is manageable. So if I am able to mention something openly, I'm more likely to be able to manage those things. So if I can mention the emotions I'm feeling or the trauma I've experienced, I'm more likely to be able to manage those things. So that's what a podcast is, right? Especially if it's a podcast about mental health and recovery like ours is. So we do a lot of storytelling where we have past clients or other treatment providers or community members that are leaders in this area just sharing their stories and their experiences to normalize it and to let the listeners know that, one, you're not alone, and two, it's okay to not be okay. This past season, the one we're sort of like wrapping up right now with our last couple episodes of the year, has been more topical, where we've addressed specific issues within the areas of mental health and addiction that have caused more trauma or more trouble for people than needed to happen. So like, for example, we've talked about how stigma plays a role in hiring practices, and how do you talk to your employer about the fact that you need a couple more days PTO because you're bummed, right? Because frankly, it shouldn't be an employer's business why you're using your PTO, but some of them are going to ask. So how do you have that conversation in a way that honors yourself and what you need and doesn't necessarily burn a bridge with the person who's paying your bills, right? So like ideas like that. We've also explored slightly more, dare I say, triggering topics like upcoming. We'll be talking about the link between mental health and violence, and how mental health is so often the scapegoat for things like gun violence, school shootings, etc., where oftentimes it is pinned upon mental illness when truly there's something else happening biologically and socially in the lives of these individuals that are perpetrating things like that. Whereas most of us dabble with mental illness, statistically speaking. And most of us are not committing atrocities that are violent in nature. So it's like we want to normalize conversations about the hard stuff in a way that's compassionate and responsible, but also accountable to telling the truth. Because the truth matters so much in conversations like this. So ultimately, that's all stigma really is it's distruth, it's untruth, it's misinterpretations and misinformed attitudes and beliefs that are ultimately harming people. So we want to try and turn the volume down on those stigmatizing ideas and turn the volume way up on the truth meter to help people find what they need when they need it.
So again, like we said, as the holidays are coming up, how can people find you?
Yeah. And
what are some resources that you think are really good? And again, this is not a substitute for any therapist. This is all advice. Let's be clear. But we want to provide you with some tools and resources to help you in whatever you're dealing with. This is all advice. So what would you suggest as far as resources?
Sure. So let me go through some national resources that any listener anywhere in the country can access, and then I'll go more local or personal. Okay. So on the national front, if you are in a moment of crisis, or let's say you're feeling suicidal, you're feeling you might want to hurt yourself, 988 is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And I would recommend just logging that number away in your head. It's like 911, but slightly different. So when you call 988, you talk to a trained crisis counselor who will walk you through what you're feeling and help you plug in with a local resource that can get you to the next healthiest step. You can also text the crisis text line, which is 741-741. So the same number twice. And anybody from any background, any age can text this number, whether it's for yourself or for someone you know, and say, hey, I'm not okay. I need some help. I need some advice. And they'll walk you through that scenario via text. Other national resources I would recommend, you can check out Mental Health America, NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, it's the national government for that, FAVOR, which is Faces and Voices of Recovery, as well as TWLOHA, which is To Write Love on Her Arms, which is a really awesome organization that does storytelling and blogs and resources and can even do subsidized treatment for people who might be income limited that need to get therapy. And they do a lot of really cool apparel if you're into that. A lot of cool like mental health and recovery themed t-shirts, stuff like that. So those are all great national resources. On the local or personal level, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Willow Center. So if you're in Hendricks County or the greater Indianapolis area, Willow Center is a great place to get help, whether for mental health or recovery. It's the easiest way to access us is just to call us. So that number is 317-852-3690. Give us a call. We'll get you plugged in with a counselor, usually within a week or two, and you'll be talking to someone to try and take that next healthiest step. But if you're not in Hendricks County, but you're still looking for local resources, I recommend looking at your county government's website. Typically, the health department will have a list of resources that include like different local treatment providers that can help point you in the right direction of where you can get professional services. If it's not a government website, sometimes there are local nonprofits like the community foundations for some counties run resource guides like that. Occasionally there'll be state-based ones, so like in Indiana, that's Indiana 211, and those are searchable websites often that are organized by topic and by need, and you can look for those resources just to figure out what the closest one is, the most affordable one is, the most meaningful one is for whatever need you have going on in your life.
That's awesome. And they can find you if they want to directly talk to you, just contact. Okay.
Just call that number, ask for Chase. I'll be happy to do whatever I can to help.
You heard him.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being our first guest. I am taking away so much.
I know, right?
Oh my God. I'm going to be rewatching our episodes just to make sure that I got a lot. But I just love the fact that let's normalize talking about this.
Absolutely.
Let's normalize sharing resources, you know. We all, in some shape or form, may have some anxiety, some triggers, you know. If therapy is not for you right now, consider it.
Right.
Meditation. There's lots of apps that you can have resources to. So I just really enjoyed it.
I feel like we need like an inclusive cookout, and he's invited.
Yes.
Oh my God,
You're invited.
He's invited.
Absolutely. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for watching our podcast, DIY Try or Buy with Yiesha and Mee Hee. And thank you for our special guest that attended today. And thank you for watching the podcast you didn't know you needed. Bye.